You've met her before. Maybe she's your friend. Maybe she's your partner. Maybe she's you. She's not just playful. She's lost. She's not just innocent. She's afraid. Why do some women resist maturity? And what is the cost of remaining the eternal girl? The eternal girl is not merely a stage of life or a type of personality. It is a psychic blueprint, a living archetype that resides deep within the collective unconscious. She is not the literal child, but a symbolic presence that inhabits the inner world of many women, regardless of their biological age. This archetype expresses itself through behavior, emotions, desires, and relational patterns that resist the natural progression toward maturity. She appears in mythology as Persephone, the maiden abducted by Hades before she had the chance to become a woman. In stories, she is the fairy tale princess asleep in the tower for rescue. In modern culture, she is the woman who seems ageless, soft-voiced, wide-eyed, always slightly detached from the weight of adult reality. What makes the eternal girl so compelling is her charm. She radiates spontaneity and a kind of magical innocence that can be intoxicating. She is emotionally vivid, alive in a way that others are not. Her sensitivity and vulnerability make her seem more human, more real. But this brilliance comes at a cost. She is not rooted. She exists in a suspended state, emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically undeveloped. This is not because she lacks potential, but because she unconsciously resists the trials that would force her to grow. The eternal girl does not want to die to who she was in order to become who she might be. She clings to the familiar lightness of adolescence, where everything remains fluid and undefined, because definition implies limitation, and limitation implies loss. She is the embodiment of a refusal to cross the threshold into womanhood, where independence, pain, and deep responsibility await. While her outer life may reflect adult roles, careers, relationships, even motherhood, her inner world remains frozen in an earlier stage of development. She often avoids confrontation, preferring harmony even at the expense of truth. She is conflict-averse, not because she lacks courage, but because confrontation threatens the image of sweetness she has unconsciously cultivated. Her identity is not anchored in essence, but in perception. How others see her becomes more important than who she really is. The eternal girl is deeply intuitive and emotionally aware, but her feelings often lack integration. She may be quick to express emotion, but slow to understand its roots. In many cases, she feels things intensely without knowing why. This emotionality can be mistaken for depth, but it is often a swirl of unprocessed fears, longings, and unresolved wounds. Her empathy may seem profound, but it often conceals a desire to be loved more than a capacity to love. Relationships become mirrors in which she searches for affirmation rather than mutual transformation. She may idealize others, especially romantic partners, projecting onto them the strength and clarity she refuses to develop within herself. When those partners fail to maintain the illusion, she feels betrayed. Not because they changed, but because they revealed what she could not face. The eternal girl archetype is not malicious. It is a protective adaptation, often born from trauma, neglect, or a culture that encourages women to remain passive, pleasing, dependent. For some, the eternal girl was the only version of self that gained approval, love, or safety. To abandon her feels like a betrayal of everything that once ensured survival. So she stays, not as a conscious choice, as a psychic defense against a world perceived as too harsh, too demanding, or too painful to enter fully. Fear of individuation lies at the heart of the eternal girl's psychological struggle. Individuation is not a simple process of becoming more adult, in the conventional sense. It is a profound and often painful transformation in which the individual confronts the unknown parts of themselves, integrates their contradictions, and gradually moves toward wholeness. It demands the dismantling of illusions, the encounter with one's own shadow, and the abandonment of roles that no longer serve the evolving self. For the eternal girl, this journey is terrifying because it threatens the very identity she has spent her life cultivating, an identity built not on inner solidity, but on relational dependency, aesthetic appeal, and emotional immediacy. The eternal girl does not consciously reject maturity, she avoids the conditions that make it possible. She surrounds herself with comfort, distraction, and fantasy, often mistaking motion for change. She may immerse herself in spiritual language, artistic pursuits, or emotionally charged experiences, but these can function as substitutes for true psychological growth rather than its expressions. She feels deeply but rarely examines those feelings with clarity or discipline. She is often unaware that what she calls intuition is sometimes fear in disguise. Her desire to feel safe overshadows her need to evolve. This fear is not irrational. It is rooted in her unconscious recognition that individuation requires death in a symbolic sense. It means the death of the persona she has worn to survive. The charming girl must die for the woman to be born. This involves not only letting go of the comforts of dependency, but also confronting the chaos within. The eternal girl may have internalized wounds from early relationships, abandonment, emotional neglect, or conditional love that remain buried beneath her smile and softness. To individuate is to face these wounds directly, to strip away the performances and confront the silence behind them. This silence is unbearable to her because it holds the grief she has postponed, the loneliness she has masked, and the reality that no one else can complete the work of her soul. Her inner life becomes a stage where she plays roles that win admiration but avoid confrontation. In relationships, she seeks out figures who will protect her from herself. A strong partner, a nurturing friend, a mentor who makes the world feel less threatening. These roles allow her to remain passive, to avoid choice, to defer the burden of self-definition. Her entire emotional economy is structured around the hope that someone else will give her the sense of wholeness she has not yet found within. The unconscious always resists this kind of evasion. Eventually, anxiety, depression, or relational chaos emerge, not as random afflictions, as messages from the deeper psyche. These symptoms are the soul's rebellion against a life half-lived. The eternal girl may fear solitude above all else. Being alone means being without an audience, without reflection, without validation. It is in solitude that the illusions of identity begin to dissolve. She may fill her life with noise, social gatherings, romantic fantasies, endless communication, because silence makes her feel like she is disappearing. But this disappearance is precisely what individuation requires: the disappearance of the false self. Only when the outer scaffolding collapses can something authentic emerge. Yet this idea terrifies her, because she has mistaken her performances for her essence. She does not know who she is without them. Her resistance to individuation is not stubbornness, it is self-preservation. She intuitively understands that to grow up psychologically is to encounter not just strength, but vulnerability, not just clarity, but confusion, not just love, but the painful labor of becoming capable of it. The fear is that she will not survive this descent, that she will lose the tenderness and joy that made her unique. But the real danger is not descent, it is stagnation disguised as peace. The eternal girl stays in motion but never moves forward. She changes her surroundings, her relationships, even her identity, never descends inward. The terrain of the soul remains untouched, unexamined, feared like a forest she dare not enter. The cost of individuation is the comfort of innocence. To her, that price seems too high. The eternal girl's psychological structure is deeply entwined with a longing for the masculine, not merely in the external world, but in the inner architecture of her psyche. Longing often manifests as an unconscious dependency, a psychic projection onto men who embody strength, direction, and stability, qualities she feels she lacks. To understand this dependency, one must first recognize that the masculine principle, psychologically speaking, symbolizes order, clarity, decisiveness, capacity to act with autonomy. In the balanced psyche, both masculine and feminine energies are present and integrated. However, in the eternal girl, inner masculine, what ancient thinkers called the animus, remains undeveloped, and thus she looks for it outside herself. Her relationships with men are rarely based on mutual exchange or authentic connection. Instead, they are built upon a subtle yet profound imbalance. She looks to the man not as a partner but as a savior, a stabilizing force, a guide through the chaos she cannot manage alone. This is not always visible at the surface. She may appear independent, even assertive, but underneath, there is a helplessness, a belief that she is incomplete without the presence of a man to contain her inner confusion. She seeks strength, but not to learn it. She wants to borrow it, to live through it vicariously, without confronting the loneliness and responsibility of cultivating it herself. This dynamic often begins in childhood. A father figure, whether present or absent, becomes the template upon which she builds her inner reality. If he was emotionally distant, overbearing, or idealized, she may spend her life seeking his echo in other men, hoping to finally resolve the unmet needs of her youth. Her attachment is not to the actual man before her, to the image she has constructed, a fantasy of protection and direction that shields her from having to develop those qualities internally. When the man inevitably fails to live up to this projection, as all real people must, she is devastated, not because he betrayed her, but because the illusion collapsed. Her romantic life becomes a cycle of idealization and disillusionment. She falls in love quickly, intensely, and often with men who display strength, confidence, or authority. These qualities intoxicate her because they represent what she has disowned within herself. But she is not prepared for the reality of partnership. She does not know how to stand in her own center, to speak with her own voice, or to maintain a sense of self that does not collapse into the identity of the other. As a result, she may become possessive, jealous, or overly dependent, not out of malice, but from the terror of being left alone with an undeveloped self. In some cases, her entire life may revolve around being desired. Her sense of worth is externally sourced. It lives in the gaze of others, particularly men. She unconsciously equates being wanted with being safe, being loved with being held together. The masculine in this context becomes not a partner, but a container for her fragmented inner world. She resists growing out of this dependency because doing so would require a confrontation with her own inner emptiness. And so she performs. She becomes what she believes the man wants: sweet, vulnerable, agreeable. Anything to avoid abandonment. The more she molds herself to fit another's expectations, the further she drifts from her own truth. When the eternal girl is left alone, without a partner to project upon, kind of existential crisis sets in. Without a man to orbit, she struggles to define herself. She may move quickly into another relationship, not out of love, but out of a desperate need to reattach the broken link between her and the masculine. Her fear is not just of loneliness. It is of non-existence. The masculine has become her grounding force, the compass she follows, the identity she borrows. Without it, she is unmoored. She floats in the liminal space between childhood and adulthood, unable to find solid ground. Her own inner masculine lies dormant, unused, waiting for her to turn inward and awaken it. But instead, she continues to search the outer world, hoping someone else will carry what she cannot yet lift for herself. At the root of the eternal girl's psyche lies a profound estrangement from suffering, a subtle but powerful avoidance of inner pain, discomfort, and the transformative forces of psychological conflict. This avoidance is not laziness or naivety. It is an unconscious defense against the depth of her own unacknowledged suffering. Rather than confront the rawness of human limitation, grief, loss, betrayal, existential solitude, she deflects, distracts, and dreams. Her life becomes an effort to remain untouched by the gravity of reality, to preserve the delicate innocence that defines her sense of self. In doing so, she retreats from the very conditions that would allow her to evolve. This rejection of suffering manifests in many forms. Sometimes it appears as relentless optimism, a sunny disposition that insists everything is fine even when the ground is shaking. Other times it cloaks itself in spiritual bypassing, where she uses high ideals or mystical language to transcend the messiness of emotion instead of descending into it. She may claim to be deeply intuitive, guided by the heart, but her heart often remains untouched by sorrow in its true form. It is not that she feels nothing. On the contrary, she often feels everything. But her feelings lack gravity, because they are disconnected from the deeper archetypal truths of the soul. Pain is not a problem for the mature psyche. It is a necessity. It is the fire through which illusions are burned away, and the vessel through which integration is made possible. To suffer consciously is to awaken, to shed false selves, outdated narratives, and infantile dreams. But the eternal girl sees suffering not as a doorway, but as a threat to her identity. She fears being undone because she has built her personality on the foundation of being gentle, agreeable, soft, and untouchable. To embrace suffering would be to become something else. Someone more complex, perhaps darker, more grounded, and less easily admired. Her relationships often reflect this aversion. She avoids deep emotional confrontations, not because she lacks the intelligence to handle them, but because confrontation forces her to feel the discomfort she has spent her life avoiding. She may apologize quickly to preserve harmony. Even when she feels resentment, she may silence herself in moments that call for truth, because truth is often sharp, and sharpness does not fit her self-image. She believes that love should feel light and effortless, not difficult or painful. But real love demands sacrifice, endurance, and the courage to stay when things break. In this space, she often disappears. She leaves emotionally or literally when love becomes too demanding. She craves emotional safety, but not the kind that comes from facing life's storms, only the kind that keeps her warm and untouched. Art, beauty, fantasy, and emotional sensitivity are often her refuges. These are not superficial interests. They are sacred to her. But she uses them as shelter, not as mirrors. She paints, writes, creates, or dreams not always to express a deep inner truth, but to escape it. Her imagination is rich, but it often floats above the ground, avoiding the hard soil where real transformation occurs. She is afraid that if she touches the dirt of her own suffering, she will lose her luminosity. What she does not yet know is that true beauty arises only when it is fused with depth, that the most powerful art comes not from light alone, from the dance between darkness and light. The eternal girl is often confused when others around her seem to grow, While she remains emotionally fixed, she may feel left behind, misunderstood, or even betrayed when friends develop sharper edges, take on responsibility, or confront their own pain with honesty. To her, this can feel like a kind of death, a loss of something innocent and sacred. But what she is truly seeing is the shedding of illusion, the price of authenticity. Her inner world begins to tremble under the weight of time. The mask of eternal youth grows heavier with each year. And still, she resists entering the underworld of her own psyche, where the ghosts of her childhood linger, where grief waits like an old friend she has avoided meeting. The eternal girl carries within her a fractured sense of identity, one that is fragile, performative, and deeply dependent on how she is perceived by others. Her existence orbits around reflection rather than self-possession. She is not who she is in solitude. She becomes who she is in the presence of others. Her image becomes her anchor, a delicate construction shaped by social approval, desirability, and emotional responsiveness. A mirror in the eyes of another, whether a partner, friend, or an admiring stranger. She feels invisible, undefined, almost non-existent. Her identity is not rooted in being, but in being seen. This dependency on the gaze of others is not a superficial desire for compliments or validation. It arises from a deeper existential uncertainty. Having never fully descended into herself, into the raw and silent space of self-confrontation, she remains psychologically externalized. Her ego is shaped not by authentic encounter with the inner world, but by feedback from the outer one. She reads herself through the responses of those around her, adjusting tone, behavior, posture, and even desire based on what is most pleasing or least threatening. She seeks to be liked more than understood, desired more than known. This unconscious strategy keeps her safe, but only on the surface. Because her sense of self is externally generated, it is also fragile. It can be shattered by criticism, withdrawal, rejection, or perceived indifference. A single harsh word, a moment of emotional neglect, or a failure to be recognized can send her spiraling into self-doubt or despair. She does not have a stable core to retreat to when the world becomes unkind. In such moments, the mask of poise or sweetness begins to crack, revealing not malice but deep insecurity. She may respond with defensiveness, tears, withdrawal, or in some cases, seduction, using charm and softness to restore harmony and re-establish the reflection she has lost. This instability often leads her into performative cycles. She becomes what is needed in the moment, a shapeshifter adapting to context and audience. In social settings, she may play the role of the enchanting innocent, the emotional confidante, or the quirky free spirit. These roles are not fake. They are aspects of her, but they are not her entirety. They become problematic when she begins to identify with them completely, confusing role with reality. Over time, she loses touch with her deeper instincts and inner voice, and lives instead through scripts written by her need to be loved. Her inability to access a solid internal identity also distorts her relationship with desire. She often does not know what she truly wants. Her longing is shaped by the needs of others. What pleases, what attracts, what maintains harmony. She may believe she desires intimacy, but unconsciously fears the exposure it brings. She may pursue freedom, but only within the boundaries of emotional safety. The tension between her real self and her performed self grows quietly in the background, manifesting in anxiety, vague dissatisfaction, or emotional burnout. She may change environments, relationships, or lifestyles, hoping to find the missing piece, unaware that the piece is not out there at all. In moments of solitude, her identity often dissolves. With no one to reflect her, she becomes uncertain, anxious, restless. She may distract herself with fantasies, media, or the search for new connections to re-establish the mirror. Silence becomes unbearable, not because it is empty, because it threatens to reveal that she does not yet know herself. This fear of inner emptiness drives her into constant movement, emotionally, socially, even spiritually. But each new context brings the same hunger, because what she is seeking is not outside of her. It is the core she has not yet descended into, authentic self that does not depend on admiration to exist. This fractured identity can also create a quiet resentment. She may feel exhausted by her own performance, longing to be seen without having to perform. She may dream of a love that knows her beyond her sweetness, beyond her fragility, but be terrified of the vulnerability such knowing requires. The eternal girl is caught between the desire to be real and the fear of what that reality might cost. She fears that if she stops being who everyone loves, she will become invisible, or worse, unlovable. And so, she continues the dance of reflection, forever orbiting around others, forever delaying the moment when she must turn inward, face the mirror of the soul, and meet the woman she has yet to become. The eternal girl is not a caricature or a shallow stereotype. She is a deeply human expression of an arrested psychic development, soul that remains suspended in the threshold between innocence and transformation. Her longing for safety, her avoidance of pain, her reliance on projection, and her search for identity through the gaze of others are all symptoms of a deeper, unfulfilled need, the call to individuate, to become whole. This journey demands that she descend from the realm of dreams and appearances into the fertile soil of shadow, suffering, and solitude. Not to lose herself, to find the self that was never allowed to fully emerge. The path forward is neither easy nor obvious. It requires her to confront the very things she has been running from: her dependence, her grief, her disillusionments, and her forgotten potential. It is a path of inner confrontation, where the illusions of the eternal child give way to the reality of the adult woman, fierce, vulnerable, and whole. Only when she stops seeking her reflection in others and dares to look within will she begin the real work of becoming. Not through rebellion or perfection, but through integration, where the girl and the woman, the dreamer and the realist, the light and the shadow, can finally meet in the depth of her own soul.